They said my neighbor died last year. I watched the ambulance take his body away. I watched his door get sealed. I watched his name fade from conversations like he never existed. So tell me why, at exactly 11:47 p.m., someone knocked on my door. The knock was slow, polite, familiar. When I looked through the peephole, my heart forgot how to beat. It was him, the same face, the same clothes, no wounds, no decay. He smiled gently and said, "Good evening. Please, can I borrow some sugar?" I didn't scream, I didn't run, because somewhere deep inside me I realized something worse than fear. He never left, and whatever came back wearing my neighbor's face was very hungry. I still remember the exact sound of the knock. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent, it was gentle, almost polite. 3 soft knocks, spaced carefully, like the person on the other side didn't want to disturb me too much. That alone should not have scared me. But something deep inside my chest tightened the moment I heard it, as if my body recognized danger before my mind could catch up. It was almost 9:30 p.m. The compound was unusually quiet. No children playing, no generator humming. Even the usual radio noise from Mrs. Lawwell's room across the corridor was missing. The silence felt heavy, thick enough to press against my ears. I was in my small kitchen, stirring a pot of rice that had already gone soft from overcooking. The smell of burnt onions hung in the air. I remember being tired that night. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from living alone too long, from days repeating themselves without meaning. Then came the knock. I turned off the gas immediately. The sudden silence inside my room made the knock louder in my memory. I wiped my hands on my shorts and stood still, listening. Maybe I imagined it, I told myself. Old buildings make noises all the time. Pipes knock, walls shift. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, careful, patient. My door was only a few steps from the kitchen. As I moved closer, a strange coldness crept up my spine. The light bulb in the corridor flickered once, then steadied. I reached the door and rested my hand on the handle. "Who is it?" I asked. My voice sounded weak, like it didn't fully belong to me. For a moment there was no answer. I exhaled, half relieved, half embarrassed by my fear. Maybe it was one of the neighbors. Maybe someone needed help. Then a familiar voice spoke. "Good evening. Please, can I borrow some sugar?" My heart stopped. I knew that voice. I knew it the way you know the sound of your own name being called. Calm, slightly hoarse, always polite, always gentle. It was Mr. Bello, my neighbor, the man who died last year. My hand slipped off the door handle. I took a step back, shaking my head slowly, as if refusing the memory would erase it. Mr. Bello was dead. I attended his burial. I watched them lower his coffin into the ground behind the old church near the express road. I remembered the smell of wet soil. I remembered the way his sister cried and called his name. Dead people do not ask for sugar. Yet the voice came again, closer now. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I won't take much, just a little sugar." My mouth was dry. My legs felt weak, but somehow I moved forward again. I don't know why. Fear should have kept me frozen, but curiosity pushed harder. Or maybe it was something else, something like habit. Mr. Bello had borrowed sugar from me before, many times, in life. I placed my eye against the peephole, and I saw him. He stood just outside my door, exactly as I remembered him. Medium height, slightly rounded shoulders, his faded brown shirt neatly tucked into black trousers. His sandals were worn at the edges. In his hands he held a small plastic bowl. His face looked normal, too normal. His eyes were calm. His lips rested in a polite smile. There was no sign of sickness, no trace of the illness that took him away so quickly last year. No smell, no wounds, no blood. He looked alive. I pulled back from the door, my breath shaking. My mind raced, searching for a reasonable explanation. Maybe this was another man who looked like him. Maybe grief was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was tired than I thought. "Are you there?" he asked softly. "I know it's late." I swallowed hard. My hand returned to the handle almost by itself. The moment I opened the door, cold air rushed into my room. The corridor light flickered again, casting long shadows across his face. Up close, something felt wrong, though I couldn't say what. His eyes did not blink, not once. "Good evening," he said. I couldn't speak. My throat refused to work. He raised the bowl slightly. "Just a little sugar. I'll return it tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word echoed in my head. I don't remember deciding to help him. I only remember turning away, walking to the kitchen, and opening my sugar container with trembling hands. The shoon shook so badly that sugar spilled onto the counter. When I returned, he was still there, still smiling. I poured the sugar into his bowl. Our fingers did not touch. I was grateful for that. He said, "Thank you." His voice was warm, human. He turned and walked away down the corridor. His footsteps were soft, almost soundless. I closed the door slowly and locked it. Only then did I notice something that made my stomach twist. The bowl of sugar on my kitchen table, the one I hadn't used, was gone. And the air in my room was colder than it had ever been before. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the compound as if it might explain what had happened. Every small noise made my body tense. A rat scratching in the wall sounded like footsteps. The wind brushing past the window felt like someone breathing nearby. My mind kept replaying the image of Mr. Bello standing at my door, alive, smiling, asking for sugar. I told myself over and over that I must have been mistaken, that grief had confused my memory, that it was someone else who looked like him. Lagos is full of faces that resemble each other, I reasoned. Maybe I wanted to believe that because the alternative was unbearable. But deep down, I knew the truth. Around 2 a.m., I finally got up to drink water. My throat felt dry and tight. As I stepped into the kitchen, something immediately felt wrong. The air was warm. Not normal warmth, the kind that comes from heat or trapped air, but a strange, heavy warmth that made my skin itch. The light bulb flickered as I switched it on. That's when I noticed the sugar container. It was open. I clearly remembered closing it. I remembered tightening the lid because my hands were shaking. Yet there it was, sitting on the counter with the lid tilted to one side. I walked closer. A thin layer of sugar had spilled around it, forming uneven lines like something had brushed past it. I placed my hand near the container, then pulled back sharply. It was warm. Not just slightly warm, hot, like it had been sitting near fire. My heart began to race.
Sugar doesn't heat itself. I hadn't cooked anything since the knock. The gas was off. The kitchen had been quiet. I whispered, "No, no, no, no," as if the sugar could hear me. I backed away slowly and returned to my room, locking the door again, even though I already had. I sat on the bed until morning, refusing to lie down again. When dawn finally broke, I felt no relief. The compound looked different in daylight. The walls seemed duller than I remembered. A thin crack ran along the corridor wall, stretching like a vein. I stepped outside cautiously. Mrs. Lawal was sweeping in front of her door. She was an elderly woman who always greeted everyone with a smile. That morning, she didn't look at me. "Good morning, Ma," I said. She paused her sweeping for a second, then continued without responding. "Ma?" I tried again. She finally looked up. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "You shouldn't greet me like that," she said quietly. I frowned. "I'm sorry?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You shouldn't open doors at night." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She straightened and resumed sweeping. "Mind your business," she said, louder this time, as if ending the conversation. I stood there, confused and unsettled. When I turned toward the next apartment, the one beside mine, my stomach twisted. Mr. Bellow's door was open. That door had been locked for a year. The landlord sealed it after his death. I remembered clearly because there had been an argument about unpaid rent. Yet now the door stood slightly ajar, swaying gently as if someone had just walked through. I stepped closer, every instinct screaming at me to stop. Inside, the room was empty. No furniture, no mattress, just dust and old cobwebs. The walls were cracked and the floor was bare concrete. It looked abandoned, untouched for months. And yet, the air inside smelled fresh, clean, like someone had been living there. A sudden sound made me jump. Footsteps, not behind me, above me. Slow footsteps moved across the ceiling, pacing back and forth, stopping directly over my room. I backed away quickly and returned inside, locking my door again, even though I already had. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to distract myself by watching television, but every shadow pulled my attention. Every sound felt too close. That evening, I decided to ask someone else. I needed confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. I met Kunle, a young man who lived at the far end of the compound, near the gate. "Do you remember Mr. Bellow?" I asked him casually. He stopped walking. "Who?" he said. "My former neighbor, the man who died last year. He lived next door." Kunle stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "There has never been anyone living there," he said. "That room has been empty since I moved in." A chill ran through me. "That's not true. He lived there for years." Kunle's smile faded. "Listen," he said quietly. "People who claim to see that man don't stay here long." "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Just don't open your door again." That night, as I lay in bed, the warmth returned. And then I heard it. A soft knock. This time, it came from inside the wall. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. The knock had come from inside the wall. Not the door, not the window, the wall itself. I pressed my back against the headboard, staring at the cracked paint across the room. The light from the street lamp outside slipped through my curtain, casting strange shadows that moved when I breathed. I held my breath, listening. Silence. For a moment, I wondered if exhaustion had finally broken my mind. But then I heard it again. 3 soft taps, slow and deliberate, traveling through the wall like fingers tapping from the other side. I whispered, "Stop!" The tapping ended. I didn't sleep at all. When morning came, my eyes burned and my head felt heavy. I dragged myself out of bed and prepared for work like a machine, avoiding the wall completely. I refused to look at it. As I stepped into the corridor, the smell hit me immediately. Sugar. A faint, sweet smell mixed with dampness, like something old trying to pretend it was fresh. It followed me all the way outside. I decided I couldn't ignore this anymore. I needed proof, something solid. So instead of going to work, I went to the landlord's office. Mr. Sadiq was a large man with a deep voice and a permanent frown. He had collected rent from me for 3 years without learning my name. When I told him what I'd seen, he stared at me like I was wasting his time. "That room is empty," he said firmly. "It has been empty since the incident." "What incident?" I asked. He hesitated, just for a second. "Nothing you need to worry about." "I saw him," I said. "Mr. Bello came to my house last night." Mr. Sadiq slammed his hand on the table. "Don't say that name here." I flinched. "Do you want trouble?" he continued, "because that is how trouble starts." My voice shook. "I saw him. He asked for sugar." The landlord leaned back slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead. The room felt suddenly hot. "You people don't listen," he muttered. "That man didn't die the way you think." "What does that mean?" He stood up. "Go home, lock your door, and if anyone asks you for anything at night, don't give it." I left his office with more questions than answers. That afternoon I noticed changes in the compound. Doors were shut tighter than usual. Curtains stayed drawn even in daylight. When I passed people, they avoided my eyes. By evening, something worse happened. I returned from the market and found my door open. I was sure I had locked it. The inside of my room was arranged. Not messy, not destroyed, just different. My chair had been moved closer to the wall. The sugar container sat neatly in the middle of the table, lid closed. I approached slowly. Beside it was the plastic bowl, the same one Mr. Bello had used. It was empty, but the inside was stained brown, like old tea marks. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. A sound came from next door. Movement. Furniture scraping lightly across the floor. Someone was there. I placed my ear against the wall separating our rooms. I heard breathing, slow, steady breathing, then a low hum, an old tune I remembered Mr. Bello used to hum while washing his clothes. My legs gave way. I sank to the floor. Suddenly, the humming stopped. A voice spoke through the wall, gentle and close. "You didn't return my bowl." My blood turned cold. I left it where you put it," I said, my voice barely audible. There was a pause, then laughter, soft, almost sad. "Doors work both ways. So do favors." That night, the walls began to change. Cracks widened, spreading like veins across the surface. The wall between our rooms bulged slightly, as if something heavy leaned against it from the other side. I pressed my palm against it. It was warm. And then it moved. I pulled my hand away from the wall as if it had burned me. The surface shifted again, just slightly, like skin reacting to touch. I staggered backward, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I wanted to scream, but fear locked my voice inside my chest. The wall slowly settled, returning to its cracked, lifeless state. If I hadn't felt it myself, I might have convinced myself it never happened. But my palm was still warm, and that warmth refused to fade. I didn't leave my room the next day. I called in sick to work, claiming a fever. In a way, it wasn't a lie. Something was wrong inside me. I felt watched, not from outside, from the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. The sugar container stayed where it was on the table. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the heat, the warmth that made no sense. Around noon, there was a knock. This time, it came from the door. 3 slow taps. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. My eyes drifted to the sugar container, then to the door. I didn't answer. The knock came again, louder now. "Please," Mr. Bellow said, "I only want to talk." I backed away until my shoulders touched the wall behind me. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. "I already helped you," I said weakly. "And I thanked you, but you didn't close the door properly." "What door?" I asked. There was a pause. "The one between us." The light bulb flickered violently. Shadows stretched across the walls, bending unnaturally. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. "You opened it when you gave. Kindness is permission." My knees shook. "You're dead." Another pause, then his voice softened. "I was denied kindness when I needed it most." Images filled my mind without warning. Mr. Bellow sick, coughing, begging neighbors for help, doors slamming, curtains closing, whispers of witchcraft, fear turning into cruelty. "They locked me inside," he said. "They waited." Tears stung my eyes. "Why me?" "Because you remembered me," he answered. "Because you didn't pretend I never existed." The door handle turned slowly. I screamed then. I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed the nearest thing, a mirror from my wall, and held it up toward the door. I didn't know why. It was instinct. The door handle froze. A sharp hiss came from the other side, like breath escaping clenched teeth. "You've been listening," he said. The knocking stopped. The air returned to normal. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. That evening, I gathered courage and went outside. I needed help. I went door to door, begging people to talk to me. Most refused to open their doors. One woman shouted for me to leave her alone. Finally, Mrs. Lawal opened hers. She looked older than I remembered. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "You gave him sugar," she said. I nodded. She closed her eyes. "Then he's awake." She told me the truth. Mr. Bellow fell ill suddenly. People believed he was cursed. When he asked for help, they refused him food, water, even medicine. The landlord locked his door to protect the compound. "He died alone, hungry," she whispered. I felt sick. "He returns to those who give," she continued. "He borrows until he is strong." "Strong enough for what?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "To collect what he was denied." That night, I poured the sugar down the sink. The water turned brown, and the knocking returned, this time from every wall at once.
when the walls learned my name. I stood over the sink, staring at the brown water as it swirled away. The knocking stopped the moment the last grain of sugar disappeared down the drain. For a few seconds, the silence felt like relief. I leaned on the counter, breathing heavily, my legs weak from fear and guilt. Then the whispering began. Not loud, not clear, just my name, spoken slowly, stretched across the walls like a breath dragged through cracks. Tunde. I turned around sharply. Nothing. The room looked normal, too normal. The chair stood where I left it. The mirror lay cracked on the floor from when I dropped it earlier. The bulb glowed steadily, but the air felt aware of me. I moved toward my bed when the floor creaked beneath my feet, not from my weight, but from something shifting underneath, like the building itself was adjusting to my presence. I slept for less than an hour that night. When I woke, my throat was sore, my voice hoarse. I realized with dread that I had been talking in my sleep, whispering responses to questions I couldn't remember being asked. Morning brought no comfort. As I stepped into the corridor, I noticed faint handprints on the wall. They were small, uneven, as if pressed from the inside. The plaster around them bulged outward slightly, like stretched skin. I touched one. It pulsed. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. Outside, the compound was tense. Doors opened just enough for people to slip out, then closed quickly. No greetings, no laughter. Even the children were gone. Kunle approached me cautiously. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said. "Stayed?" I asked. "You're marked now." My stomach dropped. "Marked how?" He glanced at the walls. "The house knows you." That afternoon, the heat became unbearable. Not natural heat. This was damp, heavy, clinging to my skin. The walls darkened slightly, like sweat soaking through fabric. I heard movement inside them, slow shifting, stretching. At sunset, the power went out. The moment darkness filled the room, I felt it. Presence. Not one, many. Pressing close, breathing softly. The walls creaked like old bones. Then the voice came, no longer from one direction, but everywhere. "Tunde." I covered my ears. "Please stop." "You emptied the sugar," Mr. Bellow said. His tone was no longer polite. It was disappointed, hurt. "You didn't wait," he continued. "I told you I would return it." "I was scared," I cried. "So was I," he replied. The wall in front of me split open with a soft tearing sound. A thin crack widened until darkness showed through. From inside, I saw movement, shadows twisting, forming shapes that looked almost human. Faces pressed forward. Neighbors, people I recognized. Their mouths opened, but only one voice spoke. "Kindness binds. Refusal feeds anger." The crack closed suddenly, leaving only a scar on the wall. I fled my room and ran outside into the night. The compound was alive. Walls bulged, doors shook, windows fogged from the inside. People screamed from behind locked doors. Shadows moved across surfaces where no bodies should be. I ran to the gate, but it was sealed shut with rusted chains that hadn't been there before. Behind me, footsteps approached, slow, calm. "You can still help me," Mr. Bellow said, gently. I turned.
He stood under the dim security light, his smile gone. His eyes were deep and hollow now, reflecting things I couldn't understand. "What do you want?" I asked, sobbing. He raised his hand and pointed at the compound. "Company," he said, and the walls leaned closer.
The night the compound held its breath. The compound went unnaturally quiet, not the normal quiet of late night, but a heavy, waiting silence, as if every sound had been swallowed at once. Even the insects had stopped singing. I stood frozen near the gate, my chest rising and falling too fast, while Mr. Bellow remained a few steps away from me. He didn't try to touch me. That scared me more than if he had. Around us, the walls of the compound leaned inward slightly, like people straining to hear a secret. The cracked concrete seemed softer now, swollen in places, breathing slowly in and out. With each movement, a low creaking sound passed through the ground and into my bones. "You don't belong here anymore," I whispered. Mr. Bellow tilted his head. Neither did I in the end. The security light above flickered, bathing his face in uneven shadows. In that shifting light, I saw flashes of something else beneath his skin, dark patches, stretched shapes, as if more than one form struggled to exist inside him. "You're hurting them," I said, gesturing weakly toward the building. "They were already hurting," he replied calmly. "I only reminded them." A door somewhere behind us slammed open. A man ran out, barefoot, screaming. I recognized him as the tailor who lived upstairs. His eyes were wild, his clothes torn. "They're inside the walls!" he shouted. "They're calling me!" He didn't make it far. The ground beneath him buckled like wet soil. The concrete cracked open with a dull, wet sound, and something pulled him down. His scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a deep rumble that echoed through the compound. I vomited. Mr. Bellow didn't react. "You see, it's easier when you stop fighting," he said softly. I backed away slowly until my back pressed against the cold metal of the gate. "Let me go," I begged. "I helped you. I remembered you." "That's why you're still standing," he said. The walls shuddered again, harder this time. Windows shattered outward. Doors burst open one by one, revealing dark interiors that seemed deeper than they should be. People screamed, cried, prayed. The compound was waking up. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Lawal kneeling in front of her door, clutching a small bowl of salt. She was chanting softly, tears streaming down her face. "Salt," I whispered. Mr. Bellow followed my gaze. His expression tightened for the first time. Old habits, they won't save her. But when Mrs. Lawal scattered the salt across her doorway, the wall around her room recoiled slightly, like flesh reacting to pain. Hope flared in my chest. I searched my pockets desperately. Empty. My room, my mirror, the salt was all inside. "I need to go back," I said. Mr. Bellow stepped closer. The air around him grew colder, heavier. "No," he said firmly. "You've already crossed enough doors." The ground vibrated violently. A deep groan rose from the building, like a living thing waking from sleep. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming hands, faces, mouths pressed against surfaces. Then something changed. A child's cry pierced the chaos. I turned and saw a small boy standing barefoot near the stairwell. He was shaking, his eyes locked on the wall behind him, which was slowly bulging outward. Without thinking, I ran.
Mr. Bello called my name, sharp and commanding, but I ignored him. I grabbed the boy just as the wall split open, revealing darkness inside, moving, reaching. I threw the boy forward toward Mrs. Lawal's salted doorway. He stumbled, then collapsed inside her room. The wall recoiled violently, snapping shut. The compound screamed. Every wall pulsed at once. The ground shook so hard I fell to my knees. A deafening roar filled the air, not sound, but emotion, rage, hunger, grief. Mr. Bello staggered backward. "You shouldn't have done that," his voice cracking. I looked up at him, my fear giving way to something else, anger. "They didn't all deserve this," I said. "You were hurt, but you're becoming worse." For a moment, I thought he might strike me. Instead, he laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Pain doesn't disappear, it spreads. The walls surged again, stronger now, angrier, and I realized the truth too late. Saving one person had not weakened the house, it had chosen me instead.
The moment the thought crossed my mind, the compound reacted. A low vibration traveled up through my knees, into my chest, and settled behind my eyes. The walls stopped moving outward and began to shift toward me instead, subtly at first, like attention being redirected. I felt seen, not by Mr. Bello alone, but by the building itself. The ground steadied, and the screaming from inside the rooms softened into whispers. People who had been running now stood frozen in place, their faces blank, their bodies stiff, like figures waiting for instructions. Mr. Bello stared at me with something close to surprise. "It's listening to you," he said. I struggled to my feet. My legs trembled, but they held. "I didn't mean to open anything," I said. "I just gave sugar." His mouth twitched. "Nothing given is small." The wall behind me creaked loudly. A crack spread across it, branching like lightning, until a section slowly pushed outward. I could see movement beneath the surface, slow, heavy, patient. Images filled my mind again, sharper this time, memories that were not mine. The compound, years ago, different faces, the same fear. A woman locked in her room because neighbors claimed she carried bad luck. A man beaten in the corridor and left to bleed because no one wanted his problem to become theirs. The house remembered everything. "This place feeds on what is ignored," Mr. Bello said quietly. "It grows from denial." I shook my head. "But then why me?" "Because you noticed, and because you still feel guilt." The wall behind me split open fully this time, not violently, carefully. From inside I saw layers of rooms stacked impossibly, corridors folding into each other, walls breathing slowly like lungs. Faces appeared and disappeared in the surfaces, mouths opening as if to speak, but no sound came out. The smell hit me next, damp earth, old sweat, sweetness rotting into bitterness. I gagged. The house wanted me inside. "No," I whispered. The ground beneath my feet softened, pulling gently at my shoes. Mr. Bello stepped closer, his expression almost kind. "You can stop running," he said. "You can belong." "To what?" I demanded. "To the truth, to the weight everyone else refused to carry." A hand pushed through the wall beside me, then another. Pale, cracked fingers stretched toward me, not grabbing, just waiting. Behind me I heard Mrs. Lawal crying my name. "Don't listen to it. It will wear your voice and speak through you." I turned toward her, desperation flooding me. "How do I stop it?" She hesitated. "You don't stop it. You survive it." The house surged forward suddenly, the pull stronger now. I was dragged closer to the opening, my feet sliding across the ground. Mr. Bello watched silently. "Why aren't you stopping it?" I screamed at him.
He closed his eyes. Because it no longer needs me. That was when I understood. Mr. Bello was not the source. He was the door. The wall yawned wider, and the darkness inside breathed out. I felt my name peel away from me, syllable by syllable, absorbed into the space ahead. Then something sharp pressed into my palm. I looked down. The broken mirror. I still had it. I raised it with the last strength I had and held it toward the opening. The darkness recoiled slightly, as if confused. In the reflection, I didn't see myself. I saw the house, whole, cracked, breathing, alive. And for the first time, it saw itself too. It screamed.
The scream did not come from one mouth. It came from everywhere at once. Walls, floors, ceilings, an endless echo of pain and rage that shook the compound to its foundation. I dropped the mirror, covering my ears as the sound tore through me. The ground split open in thin lines, and dust rained from above like ash. The house was in pain. The reflection had wounded it. The walls pulled back sharply, retreating from me as if burned. The hands that had reached for me dissolved into cracks and stains. The impossible opening in the wall slammed shut, leaving behind deep scars that bled dark moisture. I lay on the ground, gasping, my body shaking uncontrollably. For the first time since this began, the house felt uncertain. Mr. Bello cried out and fell to his knees. His form flickered violently, as if the light could no longer decide what he was. Pieces of him faded in and out, his face aging, decaying, then returning to normal in seconds. "You showed it itself," he groaned. "It hates that." I pushed myself up slowly, ignoring the pain in my muscles. "Then it can be stopped." He shook his head weakly. "No, only wounded." Around us, doors burst open. People stumbled out of their rooms, coughing, crying, clutching one another. Some collapsed immediately, exhausted and broken. Others stared around in disbelief, as if waking from a long nightmare. The compound breathed heavily, like a wounded animal. Mrs. Lawal rushed toward me, her face streaked with tears and dust. She grabbed my arm. "You must leave," she said urgently. "Now." "What about them?" I asked, gesturing toward the others. "They will be fine," she replied, though her eyes said she wasn't sure. "But you, once the house heals, it will come for you first." Mr. Bello struggled to his feet. He looked smaller now, thinner, as if something essential had been drained from him. "It will seal itself again, and when it does, it will choose another door." I swallowed hard. "You could leave with me." He smiled sadly. "I was never meant to." The ground rumbled once more. The cracks began to close, slowly knitting themselves together. The walls straightened. The breathing eased. But the whispers had not stopped. They followed me as I ran to my room, grabbed my bag, and threw clothes into it without thinking. The sugar container sat broken on the floor, sticky residue staining the tiles. I didn't look at it. As I rushed out, I felt the walls watching me, memorizing me. At the gate, the rusted chains fell away with a dull clatter, as if released intentionally. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs nearly gave out. When I finally turned around, the compound stood quietly behind me, ordinary and still, like nothing had ever happened. Too ordinary. I found a place to stay across town and told myself it was over. Weeks passed, then months. The nightmares never stopped.
I dreamt of walls breathing, of sugar turning brown, of knocks that came from inside my chest. One evening, as I cooked dinner in my new apartment, someone knocked at my door. 3 slow knocks. My blood ran cold. I didn't open it. A familiar voice spoke gently through the door. "Please," Mr. Bellow said, "may I borrow some salt?"
I didn't answer. The knock came again, 3 slow, deliberate taps that echoed in the hallway like a pulse. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of the kitchen counter. Every instinct screamed at me to hide, to run, to disappear, yet my feet felt rooted to the floor. A soft, unmistakable voice called out, "Tunde, I only want some salt. I won't take long." My stomach twisted into knots. I had been living in this apartment for months. The neighborhood felt normal, the walls stable, the doors secure. Yet here he was, standing at my threshold, or at least his voice was. I told myself it was a trick of memory, fatigue, fear, loneliness, a neighbor playing a cruel joke. But even as I thought this, a cold gust brushed past me, carrying a faint sweetness in the air, the same faint smell of sugar I remembered from the first night he appeared. I didn't move. The knocks continued, rhythmical, insistent, and then came a new sound, scratching, from inside the walls, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the plaster. I backed away, bumping into my chair. My heart thundered. "Stay away," I whispered. The voice softened. "I just want what is owed." I didn't understand at first. Then I realized the house, Mr. Bellow, the walls, the whispers. They hadn't wanted sugar. They had wanted acknowledgement, small kindnesses, tiny acts that proved I remembered him, that I cared. And now, months later, the debt had returned with interest. I thought of the child I had saved in the old compound, the woman with the salt, the broken mirror, every favor, every act, every hesitation. It was all recorded, everything borrowed, never truly left. The room behind me darkened slightly, the shadows stretching toward me, creeping along the walls. They didn't move like natural shadows. They moved deliberately, purposefully, like living things. I wanted to run. I couldn't. Fear had frozen me in place. "Why now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Because you thought distance could erase debts. It cannot." I dropped to the floor, burying my face in my hands. I remembered the last time I had poured sugar down the drain, thinking I could escape him. I remembered the nightmares, the dreams of walls bending and breathing. I remembered the echoing laughter of Mr. Bellow and the way the house had learned my name. And now the debt demanded payment. I didn't scream when the shadows pressed closer. I didn't fight. I only whispered apologies, repeating them over and over like prayers. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." For a moment, silence followed. Then the voice spoke again, softer, almost sorrowful. "Kindness borrowed is not kindness spent. It is permission, and you gave it freely once." I lifted my head slightly and saw the shadows twisting, forming shapes almost human, almost like Mr. Bellow, almost like everyone who had ever lived and died in that cursed compound. "You could run, hide, or resist, but what you gave has returned. You cannot refuse it anymore."
A cold pressure pressed against my chest. I felt the walls leaning inward again, but this time they weren't just walls. They were memories, regrets, whispers of the forgotten. Every small kindness I had extended, every hesitation I had ignored, every night of fear and doubt, it all pressed against me now, shaping the space around me. And then I understood. The debt was never sugar. It was acknowledgement, attention, memory, the simple act of seeing him as a human, of offering small help, had awakened something that could not rest. And now, what had been borrowed was coming back to claim more than I had imagined. I shivered violently. My apartment felt smaller, heavier, like it had grown around me while I slept. The air thickened, carrying whispers of voices I had never heard, but somehow recognized. "Will you help me again?" the voice asked, now from all directions at once. I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to run forever. But deep down, I knew I couldn't refuse, because kindness borrowed never truly leaves, and the borrower always returns.
I opened the door, not because I wanted to, not because I believed I could survive it. I opened the door because the knocking had already moved inside me. The hallway outside my apartment was empty. No shadow, no figure, no Mr. Bello standing politely with a bowl in his hands. The lights flickered once, then steadied, casting a dull yellow glow over peeling paint and silent doors. For a brief, fragile moment, hope rose in my chest. Then the smell reached me. Sugar. Not sweet anymore. Burnt, damp, old. The smell of something once pure that had stayed too long in the dark. My stomach turned as the sound of breathing filled the hallway. Not from one place, from everywhere. The walls were closer than they should have been. I stepped back into my apartment slowly, and the door closed behind me on its own. The lock clicked. That was when I saw him. Mr. Bello stood in the corner of my living room, half lit, half shadowed. He looked different now, thinner. His skin clung too tightly to his face, and his eyes were deeper, darker, as if they had been hollowed out by waiting. "You came," he said softly. "I didn't invite you, though my voice shook." He smiled, and this time it did not reach his eyes. "You did, a long time ago." The walls trembled. Hairline cracks spread outward from where he stood, racing across the room like roots searching for water. The floor pulsed once beneath my feet. I felt the apartment breathe in, then out. "I left," I said desperately. "I tried to stop it. I showed the house itself." "You wounded it," he corrected. "You didn't change its hunger." The memories returned in a flood. Faces pressed into walls, hands reaching, voices whispering names that had not been spoken in years. The forgotten, the ignored, the people who had knocked and been refused. "You fed it," Mr. Bello continued, "and when you left, you took its attention with you." My chest tightened. "So that's it? Wherever I go, it follows?" He nodded slowly. "Not the house, the door." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. "You," he said gently, "you are the door now." The apartment shifted violently. The walls bent inward, no longer pretending to be solid. I could see shapes moving beneath them, pushing, stretching, pressing closer to the surface. I backed away until I hit the kitchen counter. The sugar jar sat there, empty. The sight of it broke something inside me. "I gave you everything," I whispered. "I remembered you. I helped you."
Mr. Bello stepped closer. With each step, his feet did not touch the floor. They sank slightly into it, as though the building welcomed him. "You gave once," he said, "and that was enough." The wall behind him split open slowly, revealing the same impossible depth I had seen before. Corridors inside corridors, rooms breathing, faces layered into the structure itself. They were waiting for me. The whispers rose, merging into a single demand: "Stay." I understood then what survival truly meant. There was no escape, only replacement. "If I stay," I said hoarsely, "what happens to you?" Mr. Bello looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, but with relief. "I get to rest." The apartment groaned as if in agreement. I felt the pressure building behind my eyes, inside my chest, under my skin. The walls leaned closer, eager, familiar. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something worse: acceptance. I stepped forward. The moment I crossed the threshold, the pain stopped. The hunger quieted. The walls straightened. Mr. Bello faded, his form thinning like smoke in sunlight. His voice reached me one last time. "Someone will knock. Be polite." The darkness closed around me gently. They say the building is quiet now. New tenants moved in last month. Fresh paint, strong locks, clean walls. They say nothing strange has happened. Yet last night, a young woman in the next apartment knocked softly on my door. 3 careful knocks. When I opened it, she smiled nervously and held up a small bowl. "Sorry to bother you. Can I borrow some sugar?" I smiled back. "Of course." The sugar jar is empty, and I am very hungry.
The young woman left with the sugar, unaware of what she had just borrowed. I watched her disappear into the corridor, clutching the bowl like it was a lifeline. The apartment was silent again, but it wasn't peaceful. I could feel it, the walls watching, waiting, remembering. I had become part of the building now, a sentinel of sorts, bound to the echoes of every kindness and every denial. I walk carefully each day. I smile politely to neighbors. I answer knocks. I lend sugar when asked. Every act, no matter how small, keeps the shadows at bay for a little while. Sometimes at night I hear faint footsteps across the floorboards that aren't mine. Sometimes I feel a hand brush against my shoulder, even though no one is there. And sometimes I swear I hear Mr. Bello's voice, soft, calm, polite. "Thank you." I have learned that kindness is powerful, but borrowed kindness never truly leaves. The sugar jar sits on the counter, empty again, and I am ready, always ready, because the door remains open.